All right, so you look at your first equation. You always look for the x because we know the equation is y equals mx plus b. Your m is your slope. So to figure out what your m is, you always have to look for the number next to your x. So here I found the x. However, there's not a number next to it. When there isn't a number, you know that you just have to fill in a 1. That means that your m is 1. Then you look next to it. In this problem, the b has to be your plus 3. In problem number 2, you do the same thing. To find your m, you always look for your x. So the 2 is your m. You always have to look for what is in front of your number. In this case, that minus sign or the negative is attached to the 2. So that makes your slope or your m a negative 2. Then your other number that is not attached to the x is your y-intercept, and that is 7. Then you go down to these graphs. Pause if you have not finished. These graphs don't have any dots in it, so you have to find the points that cross perfectly on the grid or at the intersections. One for sure place is to usually find your y-intercept or your b and put a dot. That is a for sure place where you know it's going to cross. In this case, your b or your y-intercept is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can write that down right away, 4. Then you have to find another point that crosses perfectly so you can do your slope. I'm going to take this point right here. So then when you find slope, you always have to do your rise over your run. So it's always the up and down first. So I have to go up, 1, 2, 3. So 3 over 1, 1. So when you're making a fraction for a slope, it's always important that it's in the lowest terms. For this one, I can simplify by going 3 divided by 1, which equals 3. When you write your equation, you always put your y equals 3x, always your slope first, and then your y-intercept. Okay, let's do the next one. You find your b right away, which is 1. Then you find another point that crosses perfectly. Let's do this point right here. Then you do your rise over run. 1, 2, 3. 3 over 2. And if you notice right away, I had to take a left to get this run. So I know that this has to be a negative. And I check my line, and it is going downhill, or a downward negative slope, when you go from left to right. So my slope has to be negative 3 over 2. When you write your equation, it's going to be y equals negative 3 over 2 as your slope, x plus 1. If you haven't done this one, make sure you pause it, but then we will continue. When you're having to graph an equation, you always start with your b first. In this case, you look what's in front. That minus or the negative is attached to the 2. So you always have to make it your y-intercept negative 2 for this one. Then you look at your m. It's 7 over 2, or a rise of 7 and a run of 2. So you count up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you go over 2. 1, 2. Then, I apologize, this isn't going to be a straight line. That's your line. You always double check to make sure that your line's going the right direction. This is a positive line, so that we make sure that this is a positive line. So we are good. Then you do your next one. You start with your B. You put a dot on the 3 because that's what your B or your y-intercept is. And then now this one's a -6. You always have to make your slope into a fraction. So for this one, I'm going to make it by putting it over 1. Because it's negative, I'm going to go down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to go over to the right 1. I draw my line. Always double check that your line's going in the right direction. This is a negative slope, so my line is a negative line, or going downhill. For the word problem, pause it if you haven't done this. Mr. Thompson is on a diet. He currently weighs 260 pounds. He loses, very big keyword, loses 4 pounds per month. Always when you're reading it, look for your keywords. Per always means that this has to go with your M, or your rate of change. So I know that 4 has to go with my M. However, that word loses is also attached with that 4. Loses is going to have to mean that it's going to be a -4 for my rate of change or my slope. Then I have to look for what my B is. In this case, it's saying he currently weighs 260. That's going to be your starting point. So then I need you to write your equation. Remember, it's always y equals mx plus b. So y equals -4, don't forget that negative, x plus 260. Then your question is, after how many months will Mr. Thompson reach his goal weight of 220 pounds? So in this case, you have to figure out what your x is and also what your y is. For this one, your x is going to be your months, which is your independent. Your y is going to be your pounds. So if I know x is going to be my months, my pounds is going to be my y, then I know I need to put in 220 into my y because that's my pounds. You look at your label. So you solve it by going 220 equals -4x plus 260. And you solve it like all your equations that we've solved in the past. You always do your adding or subtracting first, so always get rid of that first. So minus your 260, which equals a -40 equals -4x. Then you have to divide. And you get your answer of x equals 10. Because you have two negatives here, it cancels out and becomes a positive. And always make sure when you have a problem like this, you write it into words. So make sure you say that 10 weeks to lose or to get to 220 pounds. So 10 weeks. Then you go to your last word problem. The problem is a cell phone plan costs $30 per month for unlimited calling plus $115 per text message. We've got plus, we've got per text message. They're looking at what 1 month is, so I kind of am going to ignore this per. So this is the per that I need, which signifies my M. So I know that my y equals, my M has to be my 15 cents per text message. Then this is my cost that I have to pay for every month. which is just my fee, and that's your equation. To create this table, you have to figure out what's my X and what's my Y. In this case, month, your months has to be your X. That's your nope, just kidding. It's actually going to be text messages. Sorry about that. Text messages and cost. So if I have 0 text messages, I know my starting point, because this is my y-intercept when x equals 0, is going to be 30. Then if I send 1 text message, it's going to be $30.15. If I send 2 text messages, it's going to have to be $30.30. Okay? Then your next one, you have to figure out, if you send 200 text messages, how much would you pay according to the cell phone bill? So if we go back up here, X equals text messages, Y equals money. So I know that my 200 has to go in for my X. So my equation is going to be Y equals 0.15 times 200 plus 30. In this case, all you have to do is perform the math in order to solve for it. So you always, with order of operation, you always start with your multiplication first. So you have to solve for 200 times 0.15, which equals $30. Then you have to add it to your 30, or your y-intercept, and you get your total of $60. Make sure you label it, and it's going to be $60 for 200 text messages. Make sure you study, and you will do very well on your summative.